Okay, everybody that's listening, we do apologise for a little technical glitch there on this week's show. It's all down to the fact that Stephen's in a very remote location, but it was worthwhile hanging on, and it was also good to see those freeze frames of the young man. So I hope you bear with us. It won't be the same every week, but it just creates a little bit of, something that we don't know when he's going to freeze, when he's not, when he's going to come back, when he's not. So appreciate your patience. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, listeners, and James Wyatt, who's out there probably eagerly putting on his trainers and his vest and his shorts, getting ready to run around Frankfurt. James, we're early. It's the second Friday in a row, but better to be early than to be late. So really, really nice to have everybody listening. Now, got Steve back again. So it looks like we're back on track, Steve, every week again now. So brilliant. Now, for everybody, tough one this week. Hard to be positive about virtually anything at the moment now, with Europe going into the second lockdown, second wave, most definitely on top of everybody, and everything that's going on is all doom and gloom. So we've got to try and be a little bit upbeat about something. So Steve, something to get the old juices flowing and a little bit of that energetic engagement from you. Something I've been looking at, and I just don't understand it. Everybody now understands the global importance of the aviation industry. And some countries and some governments are getting behind it. Some are not. Some are resisting. There just doesn't seem to be the same openness and fairness. And I'm just wondering, if you were able to cast a magic wand and you were able to say the best way to deal with this would be, what would it be? And how would you put a certain choice decision in? Because obviously some companies are going to go to the wall. And there needs to be a thinning out, and there needs to be a readdress of competition and routes and who does what, where, etc. So, it's almost like nature is giving the whole world a chance to look back, maybe a bit in anger, but to look back and say to themselves, what can we do differently so we never get into this position again?
Well, great to be back again, Chris. Thanks for having me this week. Nice to be here. Look, I guess I feel a bit like Donald Trump on this week's interview. You seem to be giving Joe Biden the easy questions, and I get the tough opener, the tough opening line. That might resonate with some of those that watched the debates last week. Anyway, look, onto the topic, Chris. Great. I mean, a great point for discussion. And I think that this is really quite the sort of the distinction, or creates a distinction that we've seen in the way that governments have supported industry, have gone against industry. And
for anybody who's watching now, don't worry, his face is frozen, but his mind hasn't. Sorry, Steve, I was just telling everybody there, your face is frozen, but your mind hasn't. So if you could just repeat that again.
I was just saying, Chris, look, this has been sort of the litmus test, I guess, if you like.
Yeah.
In terms of how governments have approached the levels of support that they have provided, either as a government doing the, what's deemed to be the right thing in support of maintaining infrastructure and jobs, or as governments, as equity holders and equity, with shareholder positions in airlines, investing in capital in the airlines. And what it's done is it's directly contributed or otherwise to the amount of jobs that we've seen lost or protected. So in terms of, I don't think there's a silver bullet, Chris, but you'd asked me about, what would the sort of the measure have been in terms of, I guess, sort of sifting the wheat from the chaff, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the industry over the last few years, Chris, we've been rather successful in traffic growth, in passenger growth overall, in the freight business. It's diversified from we had a couple of glory years, and I think 16, 17, whatever, but 18. But look, the years 19, 20, Chris, were pretty good to all of us. Whether it be in the airline sector, in the service sector, airports also. the reason I reference that is because they say, look, if you were an airline or a business that was successful in those years,
Yep.
Then, and had been historically profitable with very few years of losses. I mean, we accept that there are the odd losses in here or there because of either macroeconomic global issues or microeconomic issues, etc., that may turn the dial. But if you as an airline or you as a service provider, a ground handler, you as an airport were successful in the last few years, that generally means that you won a basket case. If, however, you were losing $2 billion a year or $500 million a year and have consistently done so, Chris, for the last 10 years, then I think that puts into question the rationale for governments putting in taxpayer funds into private sector companies, or whether they're private or publicly owned doesn't make much difference. But injecting a lot of capital into businesses that are quite simply beyond the pale when it comes to competing effectively on a well managed cost base with strong disciplines and management oversight and governance, and a decent customer proposition. When we've seen the injection of cash into basket cases, as I sort of term them, and I won't reference them, it's rather unfair, but there are a number of those around the patch in different, they don't fall into the sort of basket case category across the verticals, and whether it be financial, product, operational, or other, but it might be one aspect. But that brings into question to me, Chris, are governments throwing good money after bad? Will the taxpayer see a return on that capital that's been funded? So that would be the test for me. If the answer is yes, then I think what we've seen is that, pre-COVID, these are strong, well-managed businesses that have delivered strong shareholder returns, that are delivering good customer propositions, a solid global network, and therefore they should be entitled to a level of support from not only their government, but the banks and the credit lines and the lessors and the OEMs, and that gives everybody within the ecosystem confidence that providing the industry can manage its way out of COVID-19, and there is a return to levels of travel that or freight carriage, etc., that we saw. Well, freight carriage is not in question. Let's leave that aside. That's a good point to go back to. But levels of travel that we saw pre-COVID, then I think that validates any decision on using taxpayers' money for me.
Yeah. So provided there's a new set of sustainability criteria, or as you said, success criteria, which took in the past, the present, and then for the duration of the next second wave. So something based on safety, security, sanitization, and service levels. Because, Steve, if as things start to open up again, it continues with the race to the bottom and on pricing and everything else, it's just like sawing the branch we're sitting on. I mean, it'll be crazy again. So there needs to be some sort of sanity brought into the model that people will start to get on board as we come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they have to be held to account. I mean, banks hold their their debtors to account in terms of levels of liquidity and returns, and want to ensure that certainly if they're publicly traded, if stock levels drop below a particular point in the markets, banks have the right to call back in some of those loans or those credit lines, and I think that's only right. The taxpayer should be doing exactly the same. When I say the taxpayer, I don't mean the taxpayer, obviously the government, but it's taxpayers' money that has to be used wisely, and good money must not be thrown after bad. You look at Italy, for example. There's some trouble there with good money after bad. You look at India, maybe, Chris. Some quarters around the Middle East, there is question about the sustainability, and I think that's the right approach, Chris, is actually ensuring that we've got a sustainable platform, and that these funds must be able to be used wisely. One, to keep the business afloat and provide short-term liquidity or medium-term liquidity. Two, to protect jobs. And three, actually more critically in the long term, is to protect network.
Yep.
Because if you lose network points, and I don't know what's going to happen after the moratorium, the slot moratorium dispensation, when it comes to Northern Summer 21, but protecting network is really important. That doesn't mean flying empty aircraft, doesn't mean ghost flights have to be operated. What it means is actually maintaining a sense of strategic, in government maintaining strategic responsibility for their hubs and their hub carriers to ensure that post-COVID those routes and that network is available post-COVID.
Yeah, yeah. Now another thing, obviously, cash at the moment is putting first things first. So everybody's focusing on cash. Now, whether or not it comes from government support or like a semi-part private nationalisation again, or whether it comes from private, people have to prove that it's worth something and it's of value. So whether or not it comes back again in 2023 or 2024, and that keeps swinging and changing, I think one of the most important things now is what does the industry do now while it's going into hibernation? So, and it will do. So, you know, people are talking about figures of 30%, 40%, maybe even below against what it was last year. So in hibernation now, they need to clean up. They need to get rid of all that legacy waste. This is a chance now to really, really streamline, focus, whether it's on digitization, whether it's on whatever it is. Okay, they need to do something now in this hibernation period.
Well, I think you're right, Chris. I think, you know, I mean, sort of, you know, wanting to sort of hark back onto what we've discussed previously, and it's been said by many, not by us alone, but you know, every crisis brings with it a level of opportunity. Now, what I think was in question before was the extent of the crisis.
Yeah.
You know, how deep and how wide this crisis would be felt. And one of the things that you and I discussed previously, Chris, and that some of our listeners had commented on was the disconnect between, you know, the various groups, whether it be parliamentarians or the employee groups, or it were, you know, some of the sort of less pragmatic union representatives across the patch, who really were trying to sort of, you know, herald an era of well, actually she'll be all right. You know, we don't need to go as deep as you're going, but this is not going to be that bad. You know, you're using, the company, you, my employer, are using this as an excuse to deliver the changes that you had not been able to deliver before, with new rhetoric. Actually, it's no longer rhetoric. We see now that actually those, and nobody wanted to be in this position, but all of those management teams, you know, that were called out there before for being slightly more aggressive than they were previously. Sorry, aggressive not in their approach, but aggressive in terms of having to find the transformative opportunities. I think they, you know, I think it's borne out, Chris, that it is the right thing to do, and actually, you know, this painting the bleak image and was sadly you know, sort of come true, and the reality is now that this platform, if you like, the burning,
little bit of a freeze there, but we'll wait for you to come back. We're looking.
I'm sorry, Chris, the internet isn't.
No, don't worry. I love the freeze frame. Gives me a good chance to look at that wrinkle-free, stress-free complexion that you were able to put out there to everyone. And the new haircut, mate, has knocked another 10 years off you.
I'll give you details of my barber, Chris. Sorry, I was just saying, look, the reality is, Chris, that this is no longer just a burning platform.
Yeah.
You know, this is not one fire that needs to be put out. This is massive amounts of fire in the bush that is ripping up and down, you know, states, country borders, and affecting every single piece of travel infrastructure and travel dependent business that is out there. And therefore, it's no longer about the opportunity. It's actually about the you know, a demand on businesses that if you want to survive, they have to make some very tough actions. And so hibernation certainly is a phrase that I've heard used. I think it was first used by AirAsia X, who chose to go into hibernation and hibernate their assets in the early part of the crisis. But certainly when you look at some of the recent travel that I've done, Chris, you know, the numbers that we're seeing are unsustainable. Even some of the cargo charters that we're seeing, or we've been involved in, You know, the numbers that we see in terms of payload required or payload demand is dropping back off a little bit as we sort of see this lull maybe before we go back into peak, you know, before the Christmas rush. And so that means, yeah, what does that mean for assets, and what does that mean for people? What does it mean for jobs? It probably means a pause, unfortunately, is coming. It will be a long, deep and dark winter, sadly, I think, for many.
Yeah, and just getting back to the UK now, Steve, you know, when you think about it now, you know, people are talking about they were talking about 2021, 22, now it's 22, 23, now it's 23, 24. And if it gets a little bit worse, people will be talking 24, 25. So from a political standpoint, and when you've got a certain term before elections and everything like that, you sort of think to yourself, from a strategy or a tactical perspective, does it make sense to steam into something that you're not going to see any benefits till the end of that particular term, or do you let it correct itself and then you know, focus on other areas? So it's a tough time now.
Well, let's remember politicians are self-serving for the most part. If we think that they're there to protect us and look after us, we're sadly wrong in most regards. I think there are very few genuine politicians that go into public service for the benefit of serving the public alone. And what that means is that all of their decisions, whether they be in government or they be in opposition or they be a backbencher on the government benches, generally they are trying to appease, for the most part, their constituents who put them into that position, and that means that they will sort of either go with the least sort of frictionless or friction-free decisions or policies to support their chance of electoral return. And this is all about electoral risk. Now, there are some countries in which electoral risk is not an option, or it's not of consideration, because either, you know, countries have voted so far one way for many years, particularly in parts of Asia. In the Middle East, people don't have a vote. You know, we should be thankful for democracy. Tony Fernandez, who I know won't mind me saying this, once told me, Stephen, there can be too much democracy. Too much democracy is not always a good thing. Maybe that's when I was trying to make a decision that was not in line with what he was expecting. Yeah. He was just reminding me he was the boss.
Yeah, I would think.
My point is, Chris, that you're absolutely right. There is, you know, with some, you know, electoral sort of, with the electoral cycle, we will see people doing what the right thing. You saw the results in the New Zealand election. You know, sort of Jacinda Ardern, who was largely lauded for her policies in New Zealand, but lamented by the rest of the of those in the free world, who thought locking down New Zealand was really quite peculiar for 2 cases in Auckland. But her electorate supported it, and she came back with the first majority Labour government in modern history in New Zealand. So something to be said for that. I suspect the Queensland state election, which is tomorrow, it's the 31st tomorrow. Actually, our friends in it.
As you can see now, there's another time lapse as we check in on Australia.
Well, Australia's 20 years of flying, and 20 years behind the rest of the world, Chris. Yeah. So but so the point is, it's a Queensland election today, Saturday, when our broadcast is going out, and it's certainly the view that Palaszczuk, leading a Labour government that has refused to open the borders, will come back with an even stronger victory. Yeah. So people have gone very parochial now, Chris. Maybe what we need is a more parochial industry, with people focusing on our industry, because I don't think we've seen that, and we certainly haven't seen any degree of universal support for aviation across the country, and particularly city-dependent states. If you look at the likes of Hong Kong, if you look at the likes of Singapore, you know, they're tragic circumstances.
Yeah, no, I agree, Stephen. And now as we enter into these next troubled 4, 5, 6 months, and coming back again to safety, security, sanitisation, and service, you know, there's some people are going to be worried again when it comes back with regards to congestion, contact, whether it's interaction with other people. Now, equally, some of the scenes that I've seen on some of the aircraft now, they started by boarding and deboarding by row to stop people all jumping up as soon as the aircraft comes to a stop and they all get up and try and get their bags. I think that discipline needs to come back, and it needs to be there for quite some time, so people start doing things in an orderly fashion. But who will come back quicker? Is it going to be the legacy carriers or the LCCs? And we've spoken about this. If it's to be the LCCs or whoever, and it's point to point, or they have to come up with some sort of secure bubble in transit, there's got to be this consistency again, because it's the lack of consistency that's confusing people. And for that confidence to come back, there needs to be consistency.
Well, I've had a couple of flights, as you know, Chris, and both of them on UK carriers. One flight was well managed in the way you described, disciplined at every touch point in the airport, although there were very few, because the touch points don't really exist these days much. But at each touch point, it was well disciplined, it was well controlled. On the aircraft, it was well disciplined and well controlled. Passenger reminded to wear a mask, passenger reminded to, if they need to use the bathroom, to only, not stand in the aisle, etc., etc.
People in the aisle, yeah.
On arrival, they were disembarking in rows. So, exactly as you described. I flew with a different airline, UK airline, and it was a free for all.
Yep.
So it might be about passenger behaviours and the demographic that use different airlines. There could be something with that, but I don't think that's really true in a mature aviation market like the UK.
It only needs an announcement, Steve.
I think there were announcements, Chris, but I think it's behaviours not being enforced, and it's like when you hear ping pong at the boarding gate, everybody stands up and they're rushing to the front. Well, they've done that for years, Chris. We've not been able to solve that for many years, but some airlines had better, more success than others, I should say that. The point is, these measures, how effective they are, is irrelevant. We mustn't get into the trap, the sort of the and I think it is almost diluting one's credibility when they question the effectiveness of mask usage or social distancing or or air travel. There's no reports on air travel. Well, how do we really know that? We don't. So the measures we put in place can only be as effective as those that are put in place, one, to enforce them, and two, the punters themselves, the customer, the passenger, who must conform. Now, whether you're a sort of the herd immunity brigade out there, or you're in the absolute lockdown brigade down here, actually questioning what happens in the middle is of no relevance. Actually, conformance and maintaining that is important to build confidence. This is all about confidence. It does not matter. I'm not questioning the science, but it does not matter if the mask is not effective. It does not matter if there are no cases reported by IATA in X number of journeys.
Yeah, we're still with you. You're on a roll.
It's completely irrelevant. It's about restoring the confidence, Chris. And I think confidence comes and confidence is delivered to our customers, our passengers, in different ways, different people. Somebody said to me, I flew the other day, as you can see I'm somewhere rather different, but somebody said, flying is only for the fearless right now. Look, I'm not fearless, because we've all got different fears, some different levels of fear than others. But that kind of statement is unhelpful. Yeah.
No, it is, and I understand what you're saying, and subject to cultures, but I think there's going to be this debate and this tactics that are going to be introduced, whether it's globalisation or nationalisation, before they start to decide what to do. But whatever it is, Steve, it's the way you communicate and the level of communication and the way you carry out the guidelines. And if that is done and everybody slows down a little bit and it's a little bit more focused, then I think that confidence will come back, because people will start to take note and they'll do things in a certain way. And I think that's what's necessary. So whether it comes to testing, whether it comes to borders, whether it comes to quarantine, whether it comes to bubbles or pipelines or whatever they want to call it, the big word is consistency, and people now need to slow down, have fewer things, but do them all the same everywhere. And then hopefully we'll start to get people understanding that it can be done safely. And at the end of the day, they're talking now vaccines maybe only being a blocker and not, not preventing it, and whether you've got to have it twice a year. So the whole world is going to have to live with the virus, not wait for it to go away.
Well, it's not going anywhere. I mean, and I'm not saying that because I'm a naysayer or negative. I mean, the reality is it's not. We haven't got rid of the flu. We haven't got rid of the common cold. We haven't got rid of polio. I mean, what makes us think we can get rid of this? So, governments that are sheltering in their bunkers, and hunkering down, I think that only creates further fear, Chris, and further anxiety. And a headline I saw this week in the UK press, I can't remember if it was Tuesday or Wednesday, but it's largely irrelevant. It was fear mongering. What it said was, Boris will have to increase restrictions and lock down the UK.
Yeah.
But this has been said by the media, not said by scientists, but the media are trying to drive the government now to outcomes. And if the government don't follow the outcomes that the media want, then the government are damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Yeah, I agree.
They'll be chastised for not following what the media ask. And who elected them actually?
Yeah.
Who elected the Murdochs? Nobody.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So,
they should take a higher level of accountability for what they're doing and how they're doing it. And now because France and possibly Germany, now they're putting pressure that everybody else should start going into lockdown. They should away a little bit. And but what I do think is important, Steve, is what are the indicators that will allow people to come out of lockdown? So I think if you're going to tell someone you're going to go in, it's a little bit like a sentence or whatever. You're going to go in for 3 months. Well, you're in for 3 months. But if you don't tell them what's going to happen and how you're going to come out of it, I think that's what makes people feel even worse.
You get parole after 6 weeks these days for a 3-month sentence, Chris.
No comment.
Oh, I'm not speaking from experience, just to be clear.
No, I understand. But you know what I mean? They've got to now start being a little bit more clear with what will happen if something that's expected doesn't happen, and then how does it become better, and what are the trends or the plateaus, or what are the indicators, because people are now starting to think that if we go into another lockdown, then maybe everybody better go crazy for Christmas, and those sort of messages are wrong again, because all it does is it makes people feel as if they've been cheated again if it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Now, on an upside, and talking about sustainability as well, and if we talk about environmental sustainability strategy, there seems to be quite a renewed energy about what we should be doing now in the future, almost as if, we mustn't let nature give us another slap on the other cheek as we come out of this one. So people are starting to focus on the environment and sustainability there. Any opinion on that?
Well, I think, when we've got this pause in
just like we've got now with the internet. It's what you do in the pause that counts. Come on, Steve, back to us, son.
It's what,
there you go.
Exactly.
You're back.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry.
Apologies. It's what we do in this pause that matters.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen some really great initiative from both employers and employees and supporting people with alternative employment. We've seen some great work by employers and ensuring that they've got cost-based discipline and managing a lot of that unnecessary fixed cost and overheads that were contributing to some of the challenges in this hibernation, in this pause period. What's also now important is that they use some of that thinking time, to strategically kind of identify some of their adoption of environmental practices or measures. So whether that's from an airline perspective, airlines have always been pretty good, despite the negative press. Airlines have always been pretty good at fuel conservation. It's within their interest to be conservative when it comes to fuel initiatives and fuel usage, because it's a directly obviously cost impact. But also, actually, I hope it gives industry more broadly an opportunity to rethink items like the European emissions trading scheme, etc., which hasn't been unfair, hasn't been fairly implemented, or there's some question about the validity of some of the activity that goes into that fund. I think what's also important is that we say, look, actually, what does this mean for airport electrification, for example? Adoption of electrification across airports. Now we know that electrification costs money. Money is not available in the same, or to the same levels of liquidity that was maybe historically. However, I probably think there are some shrewd airports that are going through this exercise now to further enhance and adopt their measures. And you look at general practice in terms of actually what we've done as a whole, as a community, maybe as a byproduct of COVID, but certainly one of the byproducts that we've seen, Chris, is the positive effect on the environment. Because there's less commuting, less cars, less travel, less trains, less aircraft, etc. Less diesel on lorries and trucks in our cities, and particularly living in London, I see that obviously a lot. But actually, nature is blossoming as a result. I don't know to turn this into a sort of a Radio 4 sort of episode of The Archers talking about down on the farm. But what I do want to say is it's really great for us to see that. So we mustn't also sort of think all of this has been negative. There has been some really positive things to see from a nature and environmental perspective.
Yeah, but it's weird, isn't it? And in years to come, I'm sure there'll be films and they'll be looking at it, and it'll be as if nature is the one that waved the wand, because it needed to be corrected, it needed to come back, it needed to be able to, to service so many people, and it's almost as if it's doing it with some sort of a plan, which is crazy. But as long as people now step back and start to realise that they have to care, we have to care about the home, the world we live in. We have to care about everything that's going on, care a little bit more about each other. And I think that's not a bad thing,
I agree. Yeah, my wife Ramani always says I'm a bit of a country boy, I'm always sort of happiest in the countryside or in nature. And that's absolutely true. And I've been able to do that much more in the last 6 months than I'd have ever been able to do if it hadn't been for COVID.
Yeah. And sometimes, to take a step back and reflect on what's important is good for everybody. But taking that into account, so many people are going to be displaced from their jobs. They're going to have difficulty sustaining their lifestyle, their families. It's a terrible, terrible thing. So I think as far as caring, whatever anybody can do for anybody. And I've watched how, some people from such really, really, really good positions in our industry are now doing things that they never imagined they would do, but they have to do it to keep their family and to look after the people that matter to them. So, whatever we can do as an industry to keep all of those people involved, and whether it's giving them free training, giving them whatever it is, we've got to do that so that we can bring the right people back at the right time and for the right reasons. I
saw it on the it's on the BBC News last night. It was sort of do a spotlight on Crawley. So for some of our listeners that don't know Crawley,
Gatwick.
You saw that, did you, Chris? It was really interesting, and interesting because it's sad, but interesting because of the positive message that they were kind of.
Yep, we're waiting for the positive message. You're frozen again. Come on, back. Come. You're almost back. 5, 4. There you go. Back.
Yes, sorry, there we go. Crawley is basically what we call an airport town. It's a town that has thrived off the existence of the Gatwick Airport community for many a year, whether it be directly in housing and rental properties, or it's in retail, it's in bed and breakfast and hotel, etc. Simulators, Gatwick Airport headquarters, obviously in Crawley, Virgin Atlantic HQ in Crawley, etc., etc. And it's devastating to see the effects of Gatwick Airport's demise through no fault of its own on the community Crawley. What was really positive was there was 2 lads that have turned their hand to a comic shop, Chris. Comics, that's it, which I thought was really wonderful to see. And they're talking about actually trying to do more for the community and employ more airport people.
That's right.
And one of the things that our listeners can hopefully listen out for, and we'll be able to announce next week, is that Chris and I, yours truly, and the other gentlemen on this podcast, I've been working on building up to, I think as a result of some listeners' inquiries and questions, Chris, actually what can Skylight Aviation do for the community, and how do we actually sort of start to bring more people on board that have got skills to add? And I think we'll be ready to announce that next week. So you'll hear it here first if you want to be able to participate in that. I think it's going to be a really interesting initiative to actually develop a stream that provides activity in downtime, through no fault of their own to our peers, Chris, in industry, and allow them to benefit from their skills when we're able to use and deploy them to market in so many areas that are going to be of interest to our industry, suppliers, airlines, ground handlers, service providers, etc.
Yeah, and especially when the reboot comes, and it will, it's going to need people to be able to be up and running. And one of the terrible things about being in a vacuum for however long or not knowing what's going to happen is having a structure, having something to do, having a purpose, and that's something that we should give to as many people as possible. So once they get themselves into a position where they reflect and they say, do you know something, I'm ready to go now. If I'm given the opportunity, I've got the toolkit, I'm prepared to do it, and I can do it, then it's just waiting for that door to knock.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so good. So look forward to that next week. That'll be a good one. And Steve, have a great week. Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
But don't do anything more now to make yourself look any younger next week, because it's driving me mad. We'll see you next week. So take care of yourself and everybody else out there. Try
Thanks a lot.
Be as caring as you can to everybody.
Cheers, Chris. Happy weekend and best wishes. See you.
Cheers now. Bye.
Cheers.